the shadows, making for a shore that will show a friendly face, a color, a familiar language, and a third to proceed no longer by paths indirect, but straight to home.
Hello, friend, welcome me home again. Well, I've been away, but that's all over now. Say I can stay for October now. Stay a while and play.
In the first two games of the World Series, the San Francisco Giants have run into some tremendous pitching. Dave Stewart of the A's threw a shutout in Game 1. And Mike Moore in the Oakland bullpen did the job in Game 2. At the plate, punch has been provided by people like Dave Parker and Terry Steinbach. And the A's have won the first two games of the World Series and are halfway to their first world title since 1974. The Giant dugout full of long faces all weekend.
Hello, friend, welcome me home again. I know I've been away, but that's all over now. Isn't it nice to be home again? Over here, it's clear.
And tonight, the Giants home to host the A's in Game 3.
Hello, friend.
And home for the Giants, one of the most spectacular vistas on this continent, any continent. Downtown San Francisco in the background, and we zoom into Candlestick Park in the southeastern corner of this city. For the first time in 27 years, a World Series game will be played in Candlestick Park. The Battle of the Bay continues. Game 3 of the 1989 World Series, the Oakland Athletics against the San Francisco Giants. I'm Al Michaels. Welcome to Game 3. It's been dominant Oakland pitching, of course, in the first two games, so Roger Craig has made some changes in the Giants lineup. Ken Oberkfell, the great pinch hitter, will start at third base. Matt Williams moves from third base to shortstop. Jose Uribe is on the bench. Pat Sheridan takes over for Candy Maldonado in right field. Now, the Giants, of course, are faced with a formidable task, having to win 4 or 5, in essence, to win the world title. It has become less uncommon, though, in recent years for teams to overcome a 2-love deficit. Most recently, it was done by the New York Mets in 1986 against the Boston Red Sox, and it was done the year before as well in 1985 by Kansas City against St. Louis. So the Giants tonight will be sending Don Robinson to the mound, and for Oakland, it will be Bob Welch, and there's no designated hitter in effect in the National League Park. Let me turn now to Tim McCarver. And, Tim, we talked in Game 1, the final score was 5-0, but there was a key early play involving Terry Kennedy dropping a throw from Will Clark at the plate. We go back to Game 2, the score was 5-1, but there were two key plays early in that one as well.
Well, you don't often think of key plays in a 5-1 ball game, but let's go back to the top of the third inning. Will Clark, the batter. The Giants have not had the lead in these two games. A 3-2 count, a split finger fastball by Mike Moore, pounced on by Terry Steinbach, the Oakland catcher. But look at the tough throw that he had to complete the play with Brett Butler running between him and Clark. But flash forward to the bottom of the fourth inning. Dave Parker barely, by inches, just misses a home run. Candy Maldonado with the hesitation, allowing Jose Canseco to score, and he fails to get Dave Parker at second base. So the Oakland A's take.
Cracks in the upper rim of Candlestick. Half-inch cracks is what he is saying in the upper rim of Candlestick. And they have also closed the overpass now on Jamestown into Candlestick. People here had objects fall off their walls. We've been into a number of homes where pictures and dolls and other things are littering the ground of the homes. And you can see that is what the scene looked like here as the earthquake hit. It was very brief, but it was a strong jolt. There was no question about what it was. And again, the power was off to this area. I have not been able to confirm if it is still off at this time. But again, there appear to have been some cracks in the upper rim of Candlestick Park, and that is the latest from down here near the ballpark.
We have not been able to confirm that there are cracks up there. That's what occurred, and you might tell us.
I can tell you, I was in the upper deck right behind home plate, just out here to watch the ball game tonight, and when the first shake started to hit, there were several aircraft right above us, and I immediately started to think it was vibration from the aircraft, but then it really started to roll, really started to punch, and the windows in the press boxes out along the left field line started to shake. The lights went out. People were relatively calm there. I can tell you that there are cracks in the concrete up there. I can't tell you if the cracks have been there, if they're new cracks. It's impossible to tell at this point.
We should point that out, that there are old cracks in the stadium. It is an old stadium. We don't know if there's been a major crack. We have not seen that yet. We've got people out. We're trying to get other people situated in other areas in the Bay Area now, because there's so many reports coming into us, and they're all disparate. They're coming from the police and so on. We're from other television crews, and we've got a number out ourselves. I will tell you that they have not cleared the stadium out yet. Some people are voluntarily getting out. They're very concerned about reports from us and others that this happened in the South Bay. But it's I think, problematic right now. They obviously can't go ahead with this game at this point. I don't know if they will.
I've been through several earthquakes in the last 8 years, and this was very, very scary to be up there on that upper level, especially. It shook all over the place. People were great, though. They didn't panic. They didn't run. The question is now, are they going to leave them in the ballpark?
Right. Well, we're going to try to determine that as soon as we can. Giants management, we've been trying to get a hold of them. In fact, I've heard other stations, radio and television, desperately trying to get a hold of them as well. But we don't know if they've made a decision. And if they do, they're going to have to be terribly careful about it, because obviously we've had one major route here cut off, at least at this point, and that's the Bay Bridge. So we'll throw it back to you. I wish we could tell you more than we can on these specifics, but we...
This quake lasted about 15 seconds. It was felt in Sacramento, 90 miles to the northeast. Buildings appeared to sway several feet. This earthquake shook Candlestick Park, where the World Series was to be played between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland Athletics. The quake knocked out telephones and power. That included knocking out electricity to telephone services. There are wide power outages are reported in San Francisco as a result of this earthquake this evening. Television stations were knocked off the air. Electricity was knocked out to the Associated Press Bureau there. That makes it more difficult to get information. But this is important. Whether there has been any extensive damage, whether there have been any injuries of a serious nature, much less any deaths, we simply do not know. We're trying to be very careful here and check each piece of information as thoroughly as we can. This story is in the early stages of its development. Now, with that as background, let us say that a preliminary report is that this earthquake in San Francisco this evening may have been 6.5 on the Richter scale. You know, the Richter is the scale that they use for earthquakes. And to give you some frame of reference, only a frame of reference, that the 1971 earthquake in February of 71 when the San Fernando Valley was a 6.5 on the Richter scale, and that particular earthquake caused considerable damage. But we reemphasize, not much is known about this earthquake at this moment. What is described as a strong earthquake has shaken San Francisco. Sacramento, California also felt it. There's been an early report that portions of the San Francisco Bay Bridge have been damaged. Now, that we've not been able to confirm that report of damage to the San Francisco Bay Bridge. We want to be very careful and conservative with information in the early going. However, when we know something, we will definitely pass it along to you. Now, we believe we have a live picture of the San Francisco Bridge soon to come up for you. Keep in mind that we are broadcasting from our studios in New York City. This is a live CBS News special report. And keeping in mind that electricity was knocked out through a wide area of San Francisco this evening, perhaps you can understand that we're having some difficulty making all the arrangements and getting pictures up. Now, I want to reemphasize that we're in the early stages of this still developing story. And when I mentioned before there had been a preliminary report of this earthquake in San Francisco and surrounding area tonight being as much as 6.5 on the Richter scale, it's important to keep in mind that that was a preliminary reading on the Richter scale. The West Coast, of course, has its earthquakes and tremors from time to time. Generally speaking, when someone is visiting California and says, oh, I've been through an earthquake, generally speaking, what they mean is something much, much lower on the Richter scale. In this case, we have eyewitness reports, including some from CBS people who were at Candlestick Park, where tonight's game of the World Series was to have been played, who say that this was, some say moderate, some say strong, but it's now classified by both wire services as being strong. There have been unconfirmed reports circulating around. And of course, anytime you have this sort of situation, rumors begin circulating immediately. But when you're dealing with something as serious as an earthquake, of course, you want to be conservative in assessments, particularly in the early going. And as I say, we'll try not to tell you anything that we don't know to be a fact. Now, the wire services thus far from San Francisco are just beginning to put together something more than their initial leads on the story. As mentioned earlier, the electricity was knocked out to the Associated Press Bureau in San Francisco, so they had a little tough going in the early, very early moments of this. Almost everyone we can talk to, CBS people on the scene, other eyewitnesses on the scene, people such as the police and the FBI, and both wire services say this was a, quote, strong earthquake. Whether it turns out to be 6.5 on the Richter scale or not, nearly everybody describes it as a strong earthquake. We have talked to no one who says that they have seen anything approaching extensive damage. We've talked to no one who says that they have seen large numbers of people or even small numbers of people injured, much less killed. Now, to give you some frame of reference, if it turns out, if the preliminary report turns out to be correct, that this was something in the neighborhood of 6.5 on the Richter scale, for a frame of reference, for example, we mentioned that San Fernando Valley earthquake in 1971 was 6.5 on the Richter scale. In the World Almanac, from which I am reading here, there are all kinds of earthquakes in the range of 6.5, 6.9, 6.2, but it is important to know that the worst earthquakes, for example, the world-famous San Francisco earthquake of years ago, was
Marina District. Point here, and from what we know, I'm sure you have far more information about that, Ted, but all I can say is that very, very fortunately for some 60,000 people at Candlestick Park, the epicenter was not that close to the ballpark, but certainly as unnerving an experience as I can recall by far in 20 years of living in California. We understand now, as you look at a fire in San Francisco that appears to me to be somewhere in the neighborhood of the Marina District. We have Gary Thorne, who is still in the ballpark with the Commissioner of Baseball, Fay Vincent. Gary, can you hear me?
Well, thank you very much, Commissioners. Obviously, I've been very busy here since this has occurred. Commissioner, tell us exactly what the situation is as far as the games are concerned.
Well, we'll wait to see tomorrow. We hope to play the third game here, but we obviously have to check the stadium and be sure there's no damage that would put anybody at risk.
What was the initial information that you have from the people here at the stadium as to whether or not there might be any structural damage?
Well, there are some cracks. I don't think anybody's in a position to evaluate them. We'll get that done tomorrow and try to make a judgment early in the day whether we can play tomorrow night.
Tell us about the process you went through here once yourself. What was your reaction to it? Because you, like many of us, have not been through one before.
Well, I didn't know enough to be frightened. I was standing and started to shake, and at first I thought it was a jet. And my wife said, "Oh, it's an earthquake," and I realized then that we were having an earthquake.
What will you do now tonight? Will there be more meetings tonight with anyone in particular?
No, I have no idea, Gary. I'm waiting here to see the stadium evacuate. I think people have handled this very nicely. The police and the people in the stadium have done a superb job. I'm very pleased. We need to get everybody out of here before it gets dark, which was the governing factor in the decision to call the game.
You lost all the power in here, so without any electricity, obviously, you weren't going anywhere.
We couldn't play, but even more importantly, we couldn't take a chance on having people here when it got dark. The governing factor was to get people to leave while there was enough light.
And seemingly things have been very orderly down here. There's been no problem. There was one fan who suffered some sort of an attack and was taken down to the bench. One of the interesting things, Commissioner, was the players and their wives leaving as the wives came down and children onto the field to go with their husbands.
Well, yeah. I think a lot of people felt they were better off at the pitcher's mound. But it was a very nice performance by everybody involved, and I commend all those who participated, including the fans. I think the fans of baseball were terrific.
Will the game go on tomorrow if there are not structural damages here that would prevent people from coming in?
I would think so, yes. We need to talk to the police and be sure we know enough about the entire community. We don't know anything now, and we'll make that judgment in the morning.
If the ballpark was structurally damaged so that you could not put people back in here, would you consider playing elsewhere, say Oakland?
Well, we'll see about that tomorrow. I don't know what our options are, but we'll look at them all in the morning.
Will the final decision on that be yours?
Yes, it will.
Okay. That's the Commissioner, Fay Vincent, joining us. Thank you very much for doing that. And obviously a large crowd still gathered on the field. Al?
And Gary, and we're back here in the production truck, and it's funny. I think everybody at first oohed and awed and didn't quite know what had happened. And you get the sense that people are almost more nervous now as the reality of what has taken place begins to sink in. At first, you knew you were a part of something historic, sitting through an earthquake in a ballpark preparatory to a World Series game. And now, of course, just in walking out in the last few minutes, everybody is exhaling, probably 3 times as hard as they normally would. And right now we have Gary Thorne back out in front of the Giants dugout right now. Let's check in again with him.
Down here on the field at this time, the Commissioner's biggest concern was to get people out of the stands because of, obviously, if there are structural damages here, it would pose a danger to the fans, and this ballpark being packed, they wanted them out. So the initial decision was, we've lost power, we've got to get people out of here before we can assess what kind of structural damages. We know there are at least some minor cracks that occurred. It was very scary down on the field when it happened. If you look up here at Candlestick Park, there's a cement overhang that goes all the way around the stadium. When the earthquake occurred, those cement overhangs were literally bouncing up and down, and there are people underneath those who are seated in that upper level. So that's the problem that we had. I have not even had a chance to meet the security officer, so let me get your name first.
Yeah, I'm Commander Nelson, in charge of the police operation here at Candlestick.
First of all, let me say congratulations on the job you did here, because things were handled in a very smooth fashion, getting people out. What is the status, number one, right now, of clearing the yard?
Right now, we have our traffic units and our exterior units set up in a post-game configuration. Everything is going very smoothly as far as getting the stadium evacuated. We've made announcements that the game has been postponed due to a partial power failure. Once we get an assessment of the entire stadium, then we'll make a determination whether or not the game will be played tomorrow or at some later date, whether it's going to be played at Candlestick. In the meantime, we were asking people just to hold on to their tickets, as the rain checks will be honored, and if people leave, we're asking them to turn to Pacific radio station.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention,
KSGR
please.
68, which is the Giants flagship station, which will have traffic updates.
A partial
KCO 81 and KTVS 74.
Just one. Today's game has been postponed. Once again, today's game has been postponed. Tickets for today's game may be turned in for tomorrow's game. You treat your tickets just like a rain check. Use the rain check portion of today's ticket for tomorrow's game. We asked at this time.
One final question we'd ask is, our reports are there are some minor structural problems. Do you have any reports on that?
So far, I have heard that there are some minor cracks in the stadium and around the city. We've had several minor problems which are being addressed at this time. We have a command post set up. Being in San Francisco, we have a regular contingency plan that has gone into effect for the city. We have a command post set up citywide. We have a command post set up here in the stadium, and everything is being run at this time just very smoothly. Everyone has responded very well, very calmly. The evacuation is going very well.
Thank you very much. Al, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Gary. And frankly, everybody just kind of sat there. They were calm, and there was no panic in the stands, but of course, nobody was given any instruction because we had lost power. Now, you're looking at part of the freeway section, as you know, and again, I don't have communication with New York, and I'm sure Ted probably has more information than I do, but a portion of the Bay Bridge, the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, that is the main span. Then you have Yerba Buena Island and Treasure Island coming into the picture. Then there is the cantilevered portion, and this is a double-decker bridge, and what happens is the upper level goes from Oakland or from the East Bay into San Francisco, and the lower level carries one-way traffic from San Francisco across the bay and into Oakland. And a portion, as you can see, of the upper level has collapsed onto the lower level of the Bay Bridge. The cantilever portion, that would be about, I would estimate, a mile to a mile and a half from the shoreline of the East Bay. So obviously a major disaster, and as I mentioned before and can only reiterate, very, very fortunately at Candlestick Park, everybody appears to be safe, everybody appeared to be okay, and there is no visible damage in the ballpark. Now you're looking back into San Francisco. That's, I believe, Highway 280, a freeway that parallels the Bayshore Freeway, which is Highway 101, one of the two primary north-south links from the peninsula and from the ballpark into the city of San Francisco. That it would be normally the less heavily traveled. Most of the traffic would be on Highway 101, which would be west of that. A look at where this earthquake was centered in San Benito, and you can see San Francisco sitting at the head of the peninsula. Oakland would be just to the right of San Francisco across the bay. And again, we here in the truck do not have any further information in terms of magnitude and the exact epicenter. There are some fires, obviously, in the city of San Francisco. Again, as we take a look at that, that appears to be what would be the Marina District, not far from Fisherman's Wharf. At 5:04 Pacific time, we understand was when the earthquake occurred. And we at that point, of course, were coming on the air getting ready to begin our telecast of the third game of the World Series. And again, at Candlestick Park, there was no panic. Californians sort of react with wryness, I suppose, and irony, and you kind of give each other a knowing shrug. Hey, we know what's happened. And then, as I say, the reality has really begun to sunk in. Meanwhile, Joe Morgan was down on the field. We were preparing to lead to a Joe Morgan interview. Next to Joe was Willie Mays, and Tim McCarver and I and Jim Palmer were in the booth, and there it was at that particular point. And as we say, or as we said before in the booth, here was us. Here we were at that particular point. My grammar is not particularly terrific at this point, but I think you'll all understand.
Fire burning in the area of Divisadero and Jefferson in what is the remains of a number, and I could not tell because of all the smoke, How many?
Okay, we have pictures up there now,
Okay.
Chapin. Maybe you can walk us through this.
All right, well, there's the smoke arising from the burning structures. I saw several buildings collapse. I mean, apartment buildings of 4 to 5 stories with 1 or 2 stories collapse.
Okay, obviously the fire is
people
from
in
the
the
gas.
street,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what started the fire.
Yeah.
It could have been any number of things, but the fire is now going quite strong. Fire units are responding. People in the street, stunned, walking around. What happened? Where is so-and-so? People trying to make sense of what's happened. And the marina, which of course is built on the landfill from the old.
Well, the field was where you wanted to be. The field was perfect. I know. Oh no, I thought, I said to myself, where do we go? It's coming down on me, and we're going down. I'm going, holy. And I kept waiting for the final, you know, and thank God that never came. To me, it was like it was a real steady roll and a shake, but it was a roll, yeah. Oh, it was. Okay, yeah, hold on. Yeah. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay. Okay. How am I now on the telephone? Okay, hold it up. Hold on a second. Then you want me on the headset? Or do you have to put the? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I don't need the headset portion of the headset outside of the microphone. Right. And talk to the microphone. Okay. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. All right. Fine. Now, hey, how much? David, I can't hear anybody though. Okay, okay. I've got now have a different mic too. So I know why I'm hearing is feedback now. Ted, I'm not certain that I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing, but I do see a fire. I know there is a fire in what would be the Marina District, or very close to it. It's not far from Fisherman's Wharf. It would be in the northern section of the city. It appeared to me maybe a half a mile in from San Francisco Bay, and that appears to be the most serious of the fires that I'm able to see at this particular time.
All right, good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, a little bit. In my moving towards the door, it was either me or the concrete. I was getting out.
Is this your first one?
No, I've been in them before, but nothing like this. Nothing like this.
Hey, Dave, when it gets this serious, does it kind of make baseball a little secondary with the
Oh, the baseball is obsolete. Can you think in terms of the people that was on the Bay Bridge? I know there had to be some casualties there. It's middle of traffic hours. It's a tragic day. Baseball is secondary. I mean, you got to feel sorry for some of the people that were involved in on the Bay Bridge. And right now, the city is kind of in uproar.
Dave, where were you when it hit? You were on the field?
No, I was in the clubhouse.
I'm going, hey, they say questionable for tomorrow. It's fine.
You gotta check the building? No. Good. Just happy we're here, right?
It's fine.
See you tomorrow.
So what's another couple days? Who cares?
Nothing.
Guys,
Take care.
does something like this big thing